Well, I look a bit like an idiot right now, but I thought it would be more fun if I looked like an idiot now so I can look good later, even though in some of those pictures I do not look very good. But anyway, enough said. Today, well, not today, but over the course of a couple of months, since I just slowly kind of procrastinated and then did stuff, I made my prom dress. And this took a while. I will say it was not a short project, which is why I haven't really been posting a lot lately, because I've been mostly working on this in my free time. And now, since that's done, we can hopefully get back on to other stuff and not procrastinate too much. But overall, yeah, that's about it. Hey, I finally got to wear this tiara because I was saving it specifically for prom and didn't want to show it off before then, but now that's over, so I really like this tiara. Let's get into it.
Overall, there were 3 things that were done multiple times over, and that was sewing, cutting, and I would say cursing, but it was actually pinning. There were a lot of pins that went into this. So there are also 3 different parts of the dress that I'm making because I wanted to be extra and decided that, no, I don't want just a skirt. I want a skirt that has a slit all the way up, and I have leggings on underneath it, and they have to be sparkly, so I can't just wear regular leggings. No. They have to be sparkly, so they're noticeable. So I then had to make both the bodice and the skirt, plus the leggings. So good on me for being an overachiever and spending so much more time on this than it was needed. I will say, though, the pants were somehow the easiest part of this entire dressmaking process, which is just a tiny bit depressing, honestly. You think they'd be hard, but they really weren't all that hard, and I even added pockets to them, which did make it a lot easier to carry around my phone at prom, so that was nice. I didn't have to have like a clutch or a purse that I'd lose somewhere. So yeah, very sparkly, and you can't see where I'm trying to put them on stairs, which honestly, I don't know why I kept that in here. I didn't end up adding any other modeling in it, but I'm like, you know what? I had a lot of fun trying to figure out how to actually show these pants, so I'm putting it in there, and it'll work out well enough, I guess. You can tell how many days this took by how many outfits I'm wearing, and you can also just like add 10 outfits in between each of those, because this took me like 2.5 months. I started before St. Patrick's Day and finished after Easter. Actually, that's not 2.5 months. It felt like a really long time, okay? Don't blame me for that one. But I did make these pants first, and after I made them, I'm like, yeah, we got the easy stuff done now. Not the easy stuff. We got the hard stuff done now. Now time to go do the easy stuff. And it was not like that. It was not. But these pants ended up having an elastic waistband, which it was kind of interesting figuring out how to, because there's like a little pouch that goes all the way around the waist, and then you have to add the waistband into it, and then sew the elastic together so it's just one circular loop. And sometimes it gets like bunched up, so you'd have to figure out how to flat. I really liked this. Definitely with my like ankles is that they fit, but I really can absolutely help. You could see how sparkly they were when sewing. And now for the part that definitely had me the most happy all the time, the skirt. I did also cut out the pieces to the bodice as well, but since that one I did the bodice while basically making everything else, and it was also the last thing to get finished. So I put that one in last, and oh boy, was that fun. So much hand sewing. But that's a later story for like 2 minutes from now. And I got to cutting out all of this, which before I started cutting, I was just big this skirt was. I thought I'd be like, oh, it'll end up being like 6 feet that I then have to gather and it'll work out. No, No, it was close to 12 feet. I didn't realize until I read the pattern, one of the pattern pieces, that you're supposed to cut it out on the fold, which makes it 2 times as long. It was definitely fun to gather all of that. But first we just had to sew all the panels together and make it nice and pretty, and also I probably should have prevented the edges from fraying since that was a tad bit of a problem. But it's no worry. It all worked out. I almost tripped on it like a couple of times, but it's okay. And then I also had the waistband, which I had to figure out how to make long enough because in the actual pattern, the skirt doesn't come all the way around to the front. It kind of ends at the sides of your waist and then it has like a completely open front, but I didn't want that because I'm weird and I wanted exactly what I was envisioning in my brain, which it did turn out to be what I was envisioning in my brain, but it took a lot more work than I wanted to put into it. Hey, perseverance, whatever you do, you can get through, and all of that. Next, for the skirt, after I sewed all the panels together, came the gathering. And let me tell you, what I am doing right here, sitting on the couch, making a bunch of little stitches, and then pulling it through to gather that skirt, that was not how it worked out at all. I tried to do this like 3 separate times. It failed every single time. It was a waste of multiple hours of my life. I also had like a mental breakdown in the middle of it. It sucked. I ended up having to use a crappy sewing machine, not this sewing machine, a different sewing machine, to do 1/4-inch stitches for like 10 inches at a time, hand gather that, sew that in place, and do another 10 inches, and then hand gather it and sew it in place. And by God, did I hate that crappy sewing machine. It was the worst. But then after I hand gathered all of it, I just had to add it to the waistband, which wasn't too difficult. And then I got to sew on all the trim to make it look nice and pretty. Which honestly, that part was the most relaxing because I just got to kind of freehand it over the swirls and whirly-doos in it, and it worked out really well. I mean, it stayed in place, and it looked pretty, so I ended up being really happy with how the skirt turned out. The last up is the bodice, and I end up needing to make a mock-up for it because my body does not quite fit any of their patterns for it, so we had to just make a mock-up out of muslin and then size it correctly, and then I used those to cut out the fabric and add interfacing, which was 2-sided, which means it's sticky on both sides when you iron it, which did create problems. So as you can see here, I'm ironing and having to shove a piece of plastic through. That piece of plastic is actually the boning, and I have to keep shoving it through multiple times to try and separate the sides of the fabric because both of them have interfacing on them and it's wanting to stick together, so I had to keep like heating it up and just shoving it through, and eventually it worked, but it was a very long and difficult process that I never wish again to repeat, nor do I wish any of my worst enemies to need to do ever. Another reason that I placed the bodice last was because I had the least amount of footage from making it, because I was just trying to get through it, but after I ironed it all, and then I ended up adding the lining, which was just the exact same as the pattern for the front and the muslin, you just sew it together, wrong sides facing, I got to add the grommets to it, which means I get to figure out how to not mess up grommets. It didn't work perfectly because some of them still ended up fraying a bit around the edges, but, you know, it held together for a night, and that's all I needed it for. So, in the end, it worked out. And there's one thing I really wish I had footage of, but I really didn't want to try and record, which was hand sewing the trim along the entire top of the bodice because I had to get around the boning in the bodice, which there was a lot of. I had to hand stitch all of it because I'd break a few sewing machine needles otherwise, and my mom said it was best to just hand sew it. So I got to spend probably about 10 hours hand sewing trim onto like 2 feet of a bodice, which honestly, I got a lot better at it as I went along, so skills that I'm learning. Woo! Overall, I had a great time at the dance, and I also got to pick up these 23 pairs of sunglasses that nobody wanted, so party favors, I'm keeping all of them. And one last thing, please don't judge me in that first picture of me without the blue sunglasses on. I just got back, and by that point, I was kind of tired, and I still had to go to post-prom.
Well, as you could see through all of that, it wasn't exactly the easiest process to make, but boy, it was really worth it. I had a great time. I would definitely do it again, even though I said I wouldn't ever do it again because it was so much work. We're probably going to do it again, so stick around for that one next year. It's going to be another blast. I hope you all have a great day now. Bye-bye.